All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you guys have often heard me use the term ABC. Always be connecting. And I got to tell you, I got someone on today who was going to take that term and go to a absolute next level. She runs a company called It's Connection. Yeah, Connection Catalyst, Miss Rachel Rozen. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Aswan. Really excited to be here today.
Yes, excited to have you. And as I was listening to you before, kind of prepping for this, you had mentioned being in the hospitality, like starting out in the hospitality world, and mentioned not realizing that actually connecting and meeting people and just actually doing those soft skills was something that you had to learn on the fly. So I think the best way to start off is just kind of speak to us a little bit about your background, how you grew up, some of the major lessons that you took growing up, and then we'll kind of kick things off from there.
Yeah, so my career started in hospitality. I cooked for the beginning of my career and then worked in hotels and restaurants in the front of the house.
Mhm.
And when you're cooking, you're just in the back getting things out the door. So you don't really pay attention to anything other than the food that's on the ticket and
Mhm.
communicating with the people that are on the line. But then when you go to the front of the house, you really need to start connecting
Right.
with your customers
Mhm.
and understanding what their needs are. And I didn't realize how important that was now of the skills that I learned then. And Steve Jobs always has a quote of saying, you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only do them looking backwards. And that's kind of what brought me to do this work today because I realized I learned so many skills around how to connect with different people. So when people are coming into hotels or restaurants, you get to know them and you understand their likes and their dislikes, and you have all that listed down because you want to give them the best experience you possibly can. And
Mhm.
even if you're meeting someone new, you're striking a conversation with someone to start to learn more about them. And
Right.
so then they may become a regular for you. When I worked in restaurants in New York City, some of my best customers that became my regulars were those that had a problem.
Mhm.
And I was able to solve that problem for them. And then because I gave them such a good of experience, even though the experience initially was bad, they
Right.
kept coming back because they knew that they were going to get that service and that same opportunity to have a great meal and great service every
Mhm.
time they came back into the restaurant.
So what kinds of things were driving you to get out of your comfort zone to connect? And I asked that because I spent a really, when I say brief, really brief time working at a restaurant. It's I don't know if they have it in New York. It's called the Green Turtle. I grew up in
Hmm.
Maryland. And the
Yep.
Green Turtle is like a sports bar. So it was
Yep.
in Chantilly, Virginia, and there was this gym that just got built, and I was training out of there. And since it was just open, I tried to, work at this sports bar to get people in to the gym so I could connect with them. Didn't work out too well, but I got a small taste in terms of like you mentioned, the back of the house and the front of the house, and it's like two different worlds. And one of the things that I had picked up on when I was there is you have to actually care. There has to be something driving you to really get those tips and really get the interest of the people because you're right. You're gonna get regulars if you show some level of compassion that it's not just here's your food and good meal and good riddance. So what were some of those things that were like driving you during that time to get out of your comfort zone?
I think it was really important to just find ways to have a connection point with someone. Like, why are they there? So I
Mhm.
am familiar with the Green Turtle. I actually worked in DC out of college. So,
There you go.
but
Guys, just
my
been playing stuff. You know how we do here, man. It's happening. It's happening as it always does on this show.
Yeah. And so actually my first job at Hyatt, I did a management training program. And then after that, I worked at a sports bar. So
Mhm.
for example, we'll just use a sports bar
Yeah.
as an example, but why do people come to a sports bar?
Mhm.
They want to watch sports.
Sports,
So
yeah, that was
even if
that, that was my
I
motivation. I'm like, all right, yo, got the business, the fitness training. It's like a sports-based gym, and I'm a sports guy, so maybe I could figure out a way to get people in the gym and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So even if I didn't like a specific sport, like the sports bar that I worked at was a very big football bar. Like football was a big thing. And obviously in DC, it's you're the Redskins, well, now Commanders, but it was Redskins
Hey,
back
Brett, we're
then,
Redskins fans. You can say it. We're
right?
allowed to say it now.
Okay. So Redskins and Cowboys, that was obviously like the biggest thing. And people would come to, especially when the Redskins and the Cowboys played each other. But it was learning about what was important to them. Like, why did they come to watch football? What was exciting about that for them? Or maybe they're coming to watch something else, but just getting to know people from a human level really started to allow myself to open up a little bit more too, to get to learn more about people. And then people ask you questions about yourself too, because
Right.
as humans, we really want to be connecting
Yes.
and we often don't do it. And a lot of people that I work with, we have a fear of rejection or a fear of telling somebody something that we're going to get um, criticized for. But more often than not, we have things in common. And if we just talk about it, we'd be surprised how much we can connect. Like, even, we've only been talking for a few minutes. You mentioned the green turtle. I know the green turtle. Before we jumped on the call, I'm
Mhm.
in New York City. You went to Stony Brook. There's a
Exactly.
lot of connection points, and we had never met each other face to face before, right? So the more you have the opportunity to talk to somebody, you'd be surprised how much you can connect. And even if it's something that you are not familiar with, it then gives you an opportunity to learn. And I think that's the area where people don't realize. They're always thinking, oh, I have to only talk to this person because we have to have similarities. But if you have differences, that's even better because now you're learning something that you never knew before.
Right. And also to that point, if you are doing the self-development work, you're going to develop the personality. You're going to develop the uniqueness. You're going to develop the attraction towards people because you're going to ask certain questions. You're going to do your homework, and you'll have a sort of a way of attracting the right person into your world, or people into your world, where you can get these questions off and realize how much you're connected. And like she said, less than 5 minutes of us chatting. So, that being said, I'm curious now. When you were you in school when you were in DC? Is that why you were in DC because you went to school?
That was after college. So I worked there after college.
So when you're going through those college years, and I'm asking this because I'm noticing the amount of books that you have behind
Yeah.
you and how much self-development work you did. Can you sort of compare and contrast maybe some of the self-development work that you did on your own after school versus, what you learning in the school system? Because that's another thing that gets lost as well, is you go to school, you think, all right, look, I got this college degree, you think you've made it, and you just feel like, look, I don't got to connect with anybody that doesn't have XX title when that is a completely wrong approach towards life.
Yeah, so in all honesty with you, that didn't really come to me until about 3 or 4 years ago to
Wow.
even focus on that
Wow.
because I was in hospitality. My degree is actually in culinary arts and culinary nutrition. I went to
Mhm.
culinary school in Rhode Island at Johnson and Wales,
Oh,
and
okay.
I was very focused on finding jobs within the industry. So I didn't really network per se. When you think of networking, I did. I mean, that's how I got the jobs. Every job I ever got was through networking in some way.
Hmm.
And oftentimes that is through an affinity or something that you're connected to. So all the jobs I got in school is because I went to Johnson and Wales. That was on my resume. And so people hired
Hmm.
students from Johnson and Wales. That's how I got the job at Hyatt as well. They came to a career fair. I interviewed. I got the opportunity to work at Hyatt. And then I worked at multiple Hyatts throughout my career there over 8 years. But each one was because I already worked at a Hyatt. I got recommendations from the
Right.
people that I had been working with and moved around.
Hmm.
I moved to New York City 11 and a half years ago, and nobody wanted to hire me because I didn't have New York City restaurant experience. But I
Okay.
also got that job in a way from networking too, because I was living in Seattle, Washington before that. And the GM of the restaurant that I worked at or ended up working at was from Seattle. And so anytime that someone had Seattle on their resume, he automatically interviewed you.
Mm.
And so I knew if someone interviewed me, I'd get the job. And that's how I got the job. And then from
Crazy.
restaurants and
And I hate to
hotels,
cut you off on that, but this is crazy because you don't understand how much it's resonated with me. So after graduation, I wanted to be a football coach, right? And I
okay.
graduated from Stony Brook, and I remember I'd be calling all these schools, sending my resume, just relentless. And I called Penn State, and I got someone on the phone, and he told me straight up, "Look, I don't want you to waste your breath. We reserve that position for former Penn State players."
Mm.
Like it's crazy. You're culinary school, I'm football coach, but it's like the same type of mindset. And then I had to develop my skills to develop, just like you would say, look, you got to figure it out. That is
Yeah.
insane to me.
And it's interesting because that is the same for multiple industries. And
Right.
then I left working in operations of hotels and restaurants to work on the tech side of things. So I worked at two different tech companies and I got my first role in a tech company because they were installing at the restaurant that I was at. And the CEO really liked my performance and what I was doing and the impact and that I was telling them of ways that they can improve their system. And he asked me to come work for them. So
Hmm.
that's how I got my start in tech and then moved through technology companies to become a chief customer officer.
Hmm.
Well, so this whole time of my career, yeah, I was getting jobs through networking, but I wasn't doing it from a point of having to put myself out there to network. It was just someone really tapping me on the shoulder to an extent
Right.
of like, oh, Rachel, you're the next up interview for this job. When I left that role as chief customer officer, I left on my own accord. I didn't want to continue to do that work anymore. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to stay in hospitality. I didn't want to work on something customer focused. Though I was really good at both of those things, I was super burnt out
Yeah.
because I was working so much and I was putting so much into that. I needed to figure something else out
Hmm.
to do. And that's when I started networking and realizing that building my network is what was going to get me my next opportunity
Hmm.
and realizing that there was a skill set around it. And
Right.
we don't focus on that. And to your point, in college, nobody really talks about it. They
Right.
don't teach
Ring
the
the
skill
bell.
set.
Ring the bell.
They don't teach the skill set that even the school that I went to, Johnston and Wales, is very big on helping you find that next getting a job and having you work while you're in school. We only went to school 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, so you could work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That was like it's a big part of their curriculum,
Mhm.
but it doesn't, nobody really teaches networking.
Right.
And you don't need to know the CEO. I have so many people come to me and say, oh, you need to find me a way to get introduced to this person. I had one person come to me and say, you need to introduce me to Mark Cuban. I said, I don't know Mark Cuban, but let's figure out how you can get introduced to Mark Cuban.
Mhm.
And everyone, in a way, is, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We can
Mhm.
find a way to get there, but don't I'm here to help you build that skill set to
Yeah.
be able to find the right people.
Mhm.
But you can't just pull out of thin air and want to talk to Mark Cuban. If you want to talk to Mark Cuban, there has to be a real reason why he's not going to give you his time just
Exactly.
because you randomly want to talk to him.
Right. And it's important too. I've heard it often said it's networking, not schmoozing. All right. So if you do get in front of Mark Cuban, there needs to be a very specific element, a specific question that you have for him. You can't just get in front of a Mark Cuban and just be some fan and be so excited and just whatever. You have to have very specific measurables. You have to know your numbers. If you ever seen Shark Tank, you guys know you better walk in there knowing exactly what your numbers are because these are, direct and get right to the point type of a people. But, as you're building your business and as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing how every single experience has stacked up and has led to the next, especially, what I know about the restaurant business and food, you got to be like measurables. They got to have this, especially at the Hyatt. That's a definitely a great restaurant to learn the details and what it's all about. When it came time for you to build Connection Catalyst and build your business, what was that process like? How did you actually get started knowing in the back of your mind, look, everything has to be detail oriented and I have to have like measurable set and all that. So kind of walk us through how you were able to start that.
Yeah, so I obviously never had my own business. I've always
Yeah,
worked for
that's what I
someone
said. It
else,
has to be like,
but
now I was like, okay, entrepreneur now. I'm not gonna get paid every 2 weeks. I gotta eat. I gotta go get it, man.
yeah, but working in startups, I think definitely help because you understand measure what matters to an extent, but also you just have to get things done. Nothing has to be perfect. And I think having that mentality has been helpful for me of just figuring things out as I go. Like nothing has to be exact and nothing has really gone exactly how I've expected it to per se. So for example, building my website, I've already done 3 iterations of my website in a year and a half
Hmm.
because things are constantly changing.
Right.
And I just needed to have something to start. And then I got a little bit of a refresher, and then I have another refresher. And so a lot of it has just been trial and error. And it's okay to fail. One of my favorite quotes is, your best teacher is your last mistake, because it gives you the opportunity to say to yourself, okay, if this doesn't work out, how do we make it better for the next time? As opposed to assuming that everything needs to be done right the
Mhm.
first time.
So what are you basing your next moves on? Because I heard you earlier, you were talking about potentially creating some like networking dinners, just getting people in the same room together. And there was actually a previous guest we had on. She would take companies out on retreats and set up little retreats. So just to get them out of this, this virtual world that we're all stuck in. So as you grow and you progress, how do you base your next move? Like what do you base it on?
Yeah, so what my focus is right now is really to help people. I like to say take the icky out of networking and turn it into sticky relationships. So I like to work with people from a group coaching perspective or an individual coaching perspective, as well as going in to do workshops with teams or communities, associations, things of that nature, speaking engagements to get others to see the importance of it, but also help them start to build that skill set. So, my group coaching program is called Networking Accelerator, and it's a 12-week program that allows people to get that process started and seeing how they can turn that into a habit. And I really am empowered or want to empower individuals to make this be something that they're doing every day.
Mhm.
And if it's not every day, that's okay, but it's something that you need for the rest of your life. It's not just when you're looking for a job or when you're starting a job and you're meeting the teammates. It's the conversation you're having with the person in the grocery store or the person that's sitting next to you on the airplane. You just never know who someone else knows. And I truly believe in a world of connection. And I think that the more we open up and talk to people as opposed to being in our phone or having our headphones in and not making eye contact or talking to anybody, the better the world we're going to be in moving forward.
Yeah, you beat me. You literally just beat me to the next question is, in the people connector business, this thing called AI, this thing called
Mhm.
technology, virtual stuff. And, I've been on record saying as great as these things are, you still need a human brain to work all these things. If at all, how has that affected your business?
So I think AI is great in a lot of different ways, but it's how do you use it that's going to better help you.
Mm.
So, for example, how can you speak more concisely or more eloquently than maybe you are right now in your communication? There's ways that it can help you to define process or to disseminate information a little bit better. So I think there's a lot of positives to AI that's coming out. It's really how we best use it. But I don't think that connection, actual human connection, is ever going to go away. If you think about communities from the past, let's just say, even from 100 years ago, when there's a lot of immigrants coming to the US, specifically from Europe,
Mhm.
they had all different communities and people were raised within their community.
Right.
And now we tend to be raised by social media,
Right.
where that's
YouTube.
not
I
really,
teach now. It's funny because these kids be on TikTok and they're telling me a bunch of the new. I did actually an article about this, and I was asking them what their favorite TV shows. All these kids, these are fourth grade kids. They had their favorite YouTuber. They didn't
yeah,
even watch TV anymore. Like I'm like, yo, your age, I was in the Arthur, maybe Taz, like actual TV shows on network TV.
right.
They all had their favorite YouTubers. I'm like, man, it made me want to step my. I was like, I gotta step my YouTube game up for real. It's crazy.
Yeah. And it's still a point of connection, right? Because we're still talking about, they may talk with each other what other favorite YouTubers are, but how much time are we spending watching YouTube versus having conversation? And
Right.
I think that's the area that everyone has been struggling with, especially after the last 5 years with COVID, because we went from, having, we'll just call it a normal life to
Not
our
even
life
like
getting
what I
crashed.
realized too is we kind of took, and just speaking for myself, we took that for granted. Just to
Yeah,
be able to have a bunch of people in an event, we really took that for granted when it was just like that snatched away from us.
exactly. And the same thing with, I think technology is still important.
Mhm.
The opportunity for us to even have this conversation right now wouldn't happen without the technology of Zoom,
Right.
right? We have never have met if there wasn't technology. We live
Mhm.
in completely different cities,
Right.
but we need to embrace that at the same time and say, hey, it's really cool that I'm talking to someone in Florida when I'm in New York
Right.
in a video chat because we would have never have been able to do that. So connection can happen both in person and virtually.
Right.
It's just a matter of how we want to embrace that and what does that look like, and actually having good conversations with people where we can find, again, either things that are similar that we can connect on, or learning from somebody because we don't know what they're talking about. We've never heard about that before, and you can lean in and learn a little bit.
Yes, and to that point of learning from people, I strongly, strongly suggest you have got to find like-minded people because it was on this very show. Shout out to Bridget Hom. She's been on this show. She was on the show maybe a couple months ago. But after we stopped recording, she invited me into her Facebook community, and then she put out a post saying, "This is how I use ChatGPT. Prompted to tell you something about yourself. I did it, and I was able to learn about myself through somebody else's suggestion that lives again now with completely different areas." And then boom, when you're able to do that, that's on you to do. That's something that's working within you, and you have the responsibility to do that. So we don't use excuses. We don't use a situation where, oh, because this word, we're going to complain about it. That's not what we do over here. So it's important that you as a business owner, I know that's primarily the people that listen to the show, as a business owner, you don't have the luxury of making excuses. You're going to have to figure it out regardless of what type of world we live in. So, all that being said, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just tell people a little bit about what's next and what's your overall vision? Because I know I mentioned the dinners and mentioned some of your program and stuff like that. So I'll let you speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so on the dinners specifically, I one of the reasons why I started these dinners, they're small group dinners in New York City where I bring together a maximum of 8 people. They're entrepreneurs and executives that come
Mhm.
from different industries, roles, genders, generations to come together and connect. Because oftentimes when we are meeting people in person, it's those that are in the same industry or the same role that we have. And what happens there is
Hmm.
that we tend to recycle ideas versus coming up with new ideas. And
Mhm.
so this gives people the opportunity to meet people they probably would have never met before. You never know if there's going to be a business connection, it could
All
be
right.
a personal connection, but just have a dinner with people that you can connect with that you may never have met before. And I
What's
got this idea
the,
from
well, not to, but what's the criteria for someone to be involved with the dinners? Did they apply?
they need to be an executive, so director and above, someone that works on a P&L,
Right.
and then an entrepreneur. So
Right.
someone that has their own business. And I believe, well, we can add the link to the show notes for people to
Yeah, yeah, I'll
apply
put the channel.
in
I
New
just
York
want to make sure
City.
everyone was listening. They were on it.
Yeah, then they're more than welcome to apply for the dinners. I do 2 a month and I facilitate the conversation. So these dinners are a little bit different than most networking dinners where there's one conversation at the table. So
Hmm.
most dinners that you go to, you're only talking to your neighbor. And I wanted to avoid that being the case so that everybody gets an opportunity to both listen and
Hmm.
speak. And what I found most often happens with people when they go to networking events, whether you're extroverted or introverted or an ambivert or neurotypical or neurodivergent, people don't want to be talking all the time. Or if they do talk all the time, then the other person is like, oh, can I shut them up already? And
Okay.
so this gives people an opportunity in a small group
Mm-hmm.
to both be able to talk and to listen.
Right.
And it allows you to enjoy the time that you have together.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's one-on-one, it can be hard for people because it's constant conversation. And when you're in a large group setting, if you're going to a conference or an event, it feels a lot more transactional
Mm-hmm.
and it's harder for people to mix and mingle throughout. And so this gives people a good opportunity to just have a great conversation with a small group of people.
Yes, and crossing over industries, that's incredibly important as well because, like she said, you do get when you really dive into the work you do, you get stuck in your own industry and things just get recycled and recycled. Unfortunately, the same mistakes get made over and over and over again. So, is what's the best way for people to reach out and get in touch with you if they'd like to hear more?
Yeah, the best way is through LinkedIn or check out my website, connectioncatalyst.me. Um, and happy to have a conversation. People are interested in the group coaching as well, or individual coaching. Truly believe networking is a skill that everybody needs, and just that little push from a coach can be really helpful for that accountability to just get yourself started. And I also do a free webinar on networking once a month. So we'll have that information as well, and happy to have people join whenever they're able to as
Is
well.
there an age group that you look to target? Like if there's any high schoolers that maybe because this is something I'm now the more you're talking, it's like I'm thinking of my niece need to be jumping in this, my 13-year-old nephew need to because they're in that world where they got these, man. And if we could find a class or something that they can go to regularly just to teach them these soft skills. So is there a age that you
So I
kind
generally work with college students through executives.
of
I'm not opposed to working with anyone younger, so we can definitely talk about,
right,
potentially doing that for a younger generation as well. But I truly believe that the earlier people start, the
uh,
better it is. Like one of the college students that I work with now is interviewing for internships for the summer, and in order to get that internship, they're competing against thousands of other students, not just from their school, but from other schools.
right,
And how are they going to get that competitive edge?
right.
It comes through conversations and meeting people. It's not just what you do in the interview, but how can you connect with people and really truly show who you are genuinely and authentically showing up as.
Exactly, exactly. So that guys, look again. We could probably talk for hours upon hours upon hours on this, but long and short of it is really get out of your comfort zone. I cannot stress that enough. Get out of your comfort zone, meet people again like you. I wouldn't have known that Penn State isn't hiring anybody, and I would have been going down this rabbit hole for years without having the guts to pick up the phone, call someone, and deal with rejection. So, the final thing I do, Rachel, to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back to being, I guess, back of the house, a culinary. You're just out of culinary school. You're cooking. You have a bunch of orders coming in. You're left, you're right. Just pretend that that version of Rachel is coming to the Zoom room. Give her some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would say is don't live and die by your job.
Mm.
Resume doesn't define you. Life outside of work is equally important. So find things where you can get joy outside of work.
Oh man, you could tell you could tell you read all of those books behind you, and they are like, man, it's like beaming out of you. So
I
all
did. I
that,
actually just finished 1,000 books in 5 years. That was
there
my
you go,
5 year
man.
goal.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
And I look forward to keeping up with your journey, man. I'm super, super pumped that we were able to do this. And like I was telling you before we started recording, I'm going to be applying a ton of these lessons in a couple days here when I go to Atlanta to the College Football Hall of Fame. So, all of that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.